Hi there, welcome to a series of videos called English for Emerson. We do a little of everything on this channel, and today we're talking about the British Parliament and the British royal family. Kind of a weird subject, but if you think about it, England and Britain in general has had a great deal of influence over the entire world's culture in terms of our dress, in terms of our speech, in terms of entertainment, in terms of politics, in terms of business. Maybe no country has had more of an influence on culture than England at this point. I think that's arguable. People still look to the British royal family. I'll put up pictures on the screen. From all over the world, people are interested in the British royal family to this day. Their weddings, their funerals, their speeches. People take notice of what these people do. That people are also very, very influenced by the British Parliament. What is a parliament? A parliament is a group of influential people who get together and discuss policy. It's kind of a big idea because before the British Parliament came to power, across the world, this was not really a popular idea. Basically, the church or a king had power, or a warlord, basically, had power. In England, in the year 1236, Parliament was created. It was a group of people who came together to discuss policy. They were able to kind of supervise, in a way, the king, meaning they didn't let him have too much power and get too far out of control. They limited his powers. They had to approve his taxes that he levied on the population. He had to get their approval to do stuff. And that's kind of the way things work across the world to a large extent today. In a lot of places, in a lot of countries, even though they might have a president or a king or a dictator, a lot of times they have to kind of get approval of a body of influential people who kind of supervises them a little bit. It's a popular idea, and it's worked well for England because they have had the strangest group of kings and queens over time. It's an incredible history if you look back into it, and we're going to do a little bit of that today. During the time of the beginning of the British Empire, they had a wonderful queen who was extremely effective leader named Queen Elizabeth. She did not have a husband, and she did not have any kids. She did not want to share power with a husband. And so she just stayed single her entire life. This is kind of known as the Golden Age of England. She ruled from about 1558 to 1603. This is the beginning of the British Empire, okay? She did an extremely good job, and she got along well with the Parliament. They were like a strong union, and they made very good decisions. After her death, because she didn't have any kids, they had to find a new king, and they got the weirdest guy you can imagine. They got the King of Scotland to come over and take over England. Well, they needed to have a king. They just didn't have the concept of having Parliament do everything. And so they brought this guy named King James I from Scotland, and he was strange. He did not bathe. He hated water. He hated soap. He would wear his clothes until they rotted. All of his teeth were rotten. He stunk terribly. But he had the wisdom to kind of get along with the Parliament. He didn't go too far. He just kind of had the ability to get along. And England just kind of kept on going pretty nice and strong during his time of rule. In the year 1625, he passed away, and his son, Charles I, came to power. And this is when there was a time of trouble in England. Charles I was a tyrant. What does this mean? A tyrant is someone who wants absolute power and does not want anyone to question their decisions. Personally, I think tyrants are some of the most insufferable, worst people that you could possibly deal with in life. And there's a lot of them out there. They don't want to share any of their power. They want to have absolute control. Do you follow me? And this is how Charles I was. He finally dissolved the parliament. He just said, you can all just go home because I'm taking over completely. I have power. I'm the king. Everybody's going to do what I say. And he made some of the worst taxes you can ever imagine, and basically began to tax the country into, just taxed everybody to death pretty much. Well, this brought to rise a rebel by the name of Oliver Cromwell. I'll put his name and his picture up. He kind of re-established the parliament and created his own army. So the king, Charles I, he had his own army, and Oliver Cromwell, who basically took control of what was left of Parliament and kind of brought it back together, he created his own army, and they went and they had a huge battle. And Oliver Cromwell won. And they put King Charles I to death. This began a time of having no king or queen of England. It was Parliament that was in charge, but the problem is that Oliver Cromwell was even worse than King Charles. He was a horrible tyrant. He ruled for 11 years, and when he finally passed away, everybody was relieved because he was so tyrannical and power hungry. They went and they found Charles I's son, I believe, who was Charles II, living in France, and they invited him to come back, even though he had no money. He had nothing. He was just like hanging out in France like a normal guy. They went and found him and brought him and said, you come back to power. We need a king again because we've had this horrible guy, Oliver Cromwell, and we want you back. So he came and he took over the crown of England, Charles II. They dug up Oliver Cromwell's dead body and they killed him again. They dug up his body and killed him again. He was so despised for being such a tyrant. Do you follow me? King Charles did a very, very good job, King Charles II. He recognized his father's shortcomings of being a real tyrant. And he tried to get along with the parliament, and he did. He was kind of a party animal, but he just wanted to get along, and things in England kind of went along smoothly again for a while. But when he died, he did not have any children with the queen, and so they had to find his brother, who was named James II, and bring him to power as a king. And then the trouble started again. King James II was a Catholic, and most of the country of England was what you call Protestant. They did not follow Catholicism. They had a different way of looking at things religiously, and they did not want King James II to take over England and make everything Catholic. And so they started to get very uneasy with King James. Okay? King James II had a daughter named Princess Mary, who was married to the king of the Netherlands named William of Orange. She was not Catholic, and William of Orange was not Catholic. And so the parliament essentially invited these two people, William of Orange and his wife, Princess Mary, to come take over England and get rid of the Catholic king who was called James II. They invited him to invade with their army, and here they came. Here came William of Orange and Princess Mary with their army, and they took over England in 1688. Well, the Parliament recognized at this time that they'd had enough of these huge swings that would happen when you had a new king come to power. They recognized they needed some balance. And so they created something called a Bill of Rights in 1689 that basically took away the power of the king in terms of making policies and just basically made it what you'd call a ceremonial king and queen. Basically, they just kind of were there in the palace, but they didn't really have much power, is essentially how it went. It gave the power to the parliament. And they figured out a way to have parliament have some rules so that no one could come to power and become a dictator. Do you follow me? Well, William of Orange and Princess Mary came to power. They did not have any kids. And so when they died, the British crown was vacant again. Vacant means there was nobody there. And they still wanted to have a royal family. They didn't want to just have no king or queen anymore. And so they went and found a long lost great, great, great granddaughter of that filthy, horrible, stinky King James I. Her name was Princess Sophia. They found her, I believe, maybe it was in Germany. I'm not exactly sure, but I think so. And they brought her to become the head of the royal family, and her descendants are the royal family that we have in England today. The descendants of Princess Sophia, who was a long-lost great-great-great-granddaughter of King James, the smelly. It's very, very interesting. This has had a tremendous influence on the way things are done in America, especially, and all over the world. This idea of having an elected parliament of influential people who get together and discuss policy and make decisions that try to kind of keep things running smoothly, instead of having a dictator or a tyrant of a king come to power and essentially take over and get too much control. A parliament kind of is what you'd call, it's a rule of the country by committee. A committee is a group of people who get together and discuss things. This has had a tremendous influence over how things are done all over the world. We have things called like the United Nations, and they have the European Union over in Europe. It's like all the leaders from all of Europe come together and discuss things and try to make policy by committee. It's a way of getting things done that doesn't give any one person too much power. And the rise of the Parliament of England has had a huge influence over how things are done all over the world. And to this day, we celebrate the weddings and the ceremonies of the royal family of England. Everybody gets together and watches when one of them gets married in that family or has a baby, whatever, and it's a big deal. They're in all the magazines and on all the TV shows, but they really don't have any actual power anymore. Kind of interesting, and that's all we got to say on this edition of English for Emerson. Bye-bye.